Much more on this now with Austan Goolsbee. He's the chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, which basically means he's the chief White House economist. Austan, I know it's tax day. You were focused on other things. How much of a surprise was this S&P word to you?
You know, you probably saw Moody's came out with a somewhat of a different approach than what S&P had. I think this is fundamentally S&P's making a political judgment. They reaffirmed that the Treasury, they reaffirmed the AAA status of Treasuries, and now they're saying their political judgment is that over the next 2 years, they didn't see a political agreement. Where I think some others, if you look at the president's speech, both Republicans in Congress and the president agree on substantial, the numbers are close to one another, and they agree that we got to take some significant actions in the fiscal, to promote fiscal responsibility. And so I think we're going to raise the debt ceiling, proceed on this parallel track on deficits, and I don't think that the S&P's political judgment is right.
Well, specifically, S&P cites the political gap between Democrats and Republicans being so wide that they can't see an agreement by 2014. They say there's 1 in 3 chance they're going to have to actually downgrade the credit rating. What kind of percentages should we be expecting? What is the likelihood?
Well, look, I'm obviously not in that business. I just know that the fundamental aspect of their statement there, separate from reaffirming the AAA status of the U.S., was a political probability, and it wasn't a political probability that even the other rating agencies necessarily agreed with. And as I say, in the president's speech, the numbers are pretty close to one another. And you've got the president calling for bipartisan cooperation, that we aim for significant debt reduction, the $4 trillion. It's a matter of who do we think best embodies the way the American people want to reduce that by that amount. But I don't think that political judgment of S&P ought to be, that we ought to place too much weight on it.
Okay, well, let's talk about the two political proposals that are on the table there. Both the Obama and Ryan budget plans here require the debt ceiling to be lifted up to $20 trillion in 5 years. Treasury Secretary Geithner over the weekend seemed to be fairly optimistic that we will see an increase in the debt ceiling in the near term. How close are we to a vote on that?
You know, I don't know the exact legislative timing, but I think Secretary Geithner is exactly right. We are going to raise the debt ceiling. We do need to make significant fiscal responsibility cuts that are necessary for the long-run fiscal health of the country. And we can do that on a parallel track to raising the debt ceiling. But you've seen Alan Greenspan, you've seen leaders in Congress from both parties saying they know we've got to raise the debt ceiling. So I don't think that that's actually going to be a major issue.
Okay, well, when can we expect that, and by how much would you increase the debt ceiling? As we just said, well, you know, look, both proposals would require it up to $20 trillion from the 14 it's currently at.
Well, as you know, the way the debt ceiling works, even if we were running a surplus, we'd still have to raise the debt ceiling because technically Social Security is borrowing from the other side of the government. Rather than get in the details of it, I think it's quite clear that we're going to raise the debt ceiling, and it's quite clear that we're going to do what the president has stated we need to do, which is make significant $4 trillion of cutting of our deficits. And that's, you know, there are disagreements over who should bear the brunt of those tough choices, but I don't think there's any disagreement about what we're doing.
Austan, I know you're saying the S&P judgment's a political one. Putting their judgment aside, the market, at least at the moment, seems to be voting that they're unconvinced that there is consensus in the near term being reached. I mean, when you talk about negotiations and the numbers in terms of what's going to be cut from the budgets being close, how close are you in negotiations to coming up with real consensus here?
Well, I don't. The markets still have Treasury rates well below historic averages. So they could go up 250 basis points. They still be below the post-war average.
You also have the Fed in there supporting things and other
factors. I believe that the markets are not thinking that there's going to be a problem raising the debt ceiling. or something like that. Otherwise, you would think the rates would be substantially higher. I'm not doing the legislative negotiation, so I'm not going to give you any time frame on that or what the details are. What I was laying out to you is the economics of the debt ceiling and fiscal responsibility are well understood. They were laid out by the president in his speech, and I think we're similar in terms of the numbers. They're pretty close to one another. It's just thus far a disagreement over the worldview of where should the priorities be. So in the president's budget, it's you make the tough choices, but you don't preserve the high income tax cuts, and you don't privatize Medicare and turn it into a voucher system. And I think that's just a different priority, but we're in the space of recognizing what the fiscal responsibility requirements are.
Austan, it is tax day, and we're out there trying to talk about this effort to increase transparency in terms of where tax dollars actually go right now. You've got this new tax calculator online. How does this change in any way the conversation? Because it seems like there isn't real knowledge among the American public as to where exactly their money goes.
You know, I think that's right, and it was a promise the president made in the State of the Union that he would do this, that we ought to have a receipt that people could go onto whitehouse.gov, type in their information, and it'll show you for the taxes you paid, here's what the money went to. So I was there scrambling, trying to get my taxes done last night, and when I go on today, it'll break out for you. Look, you know, here's the percent that went to national defense. Here's the percent that went to training programs. Here's what went to education. Here's what went to food stamps. And it just lays it out in a very clear manner, gives you total transparency of here's what the budget of the U.S. government is actually going to.
So you think this will help you make it easier to make the argument for further cuts?
You know, I think so. I think it's also just as citizens of the country, it's worth going and checking out where does our money go. It's not all being sent to some wasteful spending. What the money of the taxes you pay, that nobody likes paying taxes, but it's going to support our troops, pay for veterans' health, pay for education and training. It's going to a lot of important programs, and that's what the tax receipt lays out.
All right, Austan, thanks for your time.